Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. I'm looking forward to talking to Jeffrey Kamys. Jeffrey, you've got a really cool background. You're the CEO of Inherent Wealth Fund, but I want to read your bio a little bit. You have decades of experience working in the technology industry as well as the analytics field. You're the founder and chief investment strategist and portfolio manager at Inherent Wealth Fund, which is the investment advisor to the iBET Sports Betting and Gaming ETF, the only actively managed sports betting and gaming ETF. The iBET ETF is a basket of stocks that represent the sports betting, casinos, and gambling sector, including but not limited to DraftKings, Penn National Gaming, Caesars, MGM, Wynn, etc. And you're the founder, creator, and owner of Dr. Stats Fantasy Sports. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
I like a lot of different things. Sorry.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks, John, for
great.
having me.
I love it. So let's talk about just the online betting world, right? So let's just start there, because I think it's fun, it's easy, and it's in any business, you want fun, easy, and quick. Well, it's fun and it's easy and it's quick.
Right.
And you don't have to fly to Vegas anymore like you did 20, 30 years ago, or have a bookie, right? You can just do it all legally. So just kind of talk about the industry a little bit and where you fit in.
So a couple of years ago, we had a special ruling where states were starting to be allowed to get into sports gambling other than Nevada and Atlantic City, New Jersey. And so what's happened is over the last couple of years, because of tax revenue, of course, all these states are starting to legalize. We're up to 34 states that have some form of legalization right now. And the big one next to fall probably is California in November. And then we have Texas and Florida, which are really the last three that are going to be huge to the industry. As we see it, they're doing huge numbers. When New York legalized last December, January, they did over $1 billion in handles, which means bets taken in 1 month, in their very first month.
Wow.
This is super driven by, the sports, right? So what's really cool about this is when you look to what's going to evolve in the sports betting industry, think of media companies and then think of their relationship to sports betting. So if they have a sport, and you'll see this with Fox, Fox has their own Fox Bet. You'll see media companies will be motivated to get in the sports betting space. In fact, Fox really, my thesis is they started that USFL back again because they wanted to have another thing to bet on. And people, let's say Northern Americans, United States, people from the US love to bet on football. That is what we do. And I'm not talking about the football in Europe. I'm talking about football, North American football here that we play here. And that is the main driver of all gambling in the US.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about, as a business coach, I talk to people a lot that you need to think of yourself, no matter what business you're in, as a media company. In today's world, you have such access. I mean, here we are. Where are you located, Jeffrey?
I'm in California. Right now I'm in the desert. I'm down in Palm Desert, but I usually am in Mill Valley. I'm spending the summer in the desert right now, but I'm a Californian. I grew up in Chicago, but I love the West Coast.
Yeah. So here you are in California. I interviewed somebody from the UK the other day. I'm here in Detroit. And we're live streaming, on LinkedIn, Facebook.
That's right.
Any other media company can. And, when it comes to growing that media company, I want to talk a little bit, because you have such an interesting background of just starting companies, right? And scaling your company, and at a very accelerated rate today, because we can all think of ourselves like a media company. And so just talk a little bit about, not only, we don't need to go into too much detail. I'll have you back again, but what's the secret to starting and scaling and growing a business if you're always thinking you're a media business?
First off, the secret to starting any business is being able to accept failure every single day and go through it. I mean, there's nothing like, we just launched our fund really in November, and the stock market, as you know, has been rocky road. So It hasn't been like all cakes and flowers and kisses. So it's, going through those hard times. That's what it is. But media company nowadays, I think when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a small business, you're always a salesperson. And, I have a marketing company too, an agency, and essentially, be part of the story. And the best way to share that story is through social media. So if you have these availabilities to you to post on all these different places just to tell the story, not to sell, but to tell the story. Like, how did something impact your life? And that's really what gets through to people. Stories sell. The jewelry industry is built by stories. That ring is something else. That watch is something else. It's a memory from a family member. But those stories have been selling jewelry for years. And every product that has a story, is a sellable product. And that's essentially what I think of now is you have these great channels. I was a musician when I was younger, and I loved playing guitar. I wish I had the stuff and the technology people had to get their music out there today. Like you can do amazing things. And I think technology is the same for business. You have I hate to use a gun reference, but you have a loaded gun of things you can do with a business, with the media channels that are available today.
Yeah. Let's talk about telling a story. It's so interesting. I on my website, I have a bio, and I believe in short bios, but my bio is really long on my website. And at the very top, it says, hey, I know this bio is long, so you can click here to get to the nuts and bolts track record if you want.
Right.
But I wanted to provide you my story so you could get to know me, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so it amazes me. And I was hesitant to put it because I was pretty vulnerable in my story, right? I talk about, how I had cancer, how I'm dyslexic. I mean, I talk about all these things that I was hesitant, but I did it anyway. And it's interesting because people will say, hey, they'll call me. I'll say, hey, I was referred to you. I went to your website. I need business coaching, but I was really drawn to your story. And they moved to the dyslexia or the cancer.
That's right.
That's what makes it real. So I just want to talk for somebody who started so many companies and grown them. Where does the power of vulnerability come in when you're talking media, telling your story, not telling too much? You don't want to make people depressed, but just, your perspective.
Well, I always coach. I coach attorneys too because I have a marketing business and it's a niche clientele is law firms. Getting them to be personal is very difficult.
Yeah.
But what I always tell them is I say, your clients will find the needs in your stories. They'll see them as but they have to be more discreet with what they can tell about their wins or their cases. But I think we are walking brands. I know we don't want to be summed up that way, but we are the way we see ourselves is the way others will see us. So I think being vulnerable, letting people know, you failed in a business, makes you relatable, makes you real.
Yeah.
Or maybe you had, everybody talks about their successes, but I want to hear when someone tells me they fail. Being in sports betting and gambling, whenever I hear a guy who's picking, or in the stock market, whenever I hear everybody picking winners, I'm like, you are not.
Something's wrong. Right. Isn't that what Madoff was doing? Right. Somebody's always, yeah.
And more than likely, it's your story.
Right. I always tell I just want to say, and I always tell my son when it comes to betting, the house always wins, right?
That's right.
Never brag too much that you're up, right? So, but yes.
Yeah, do it for a little fun, enjoyment, and get pleasure out of it. To me, not going back to that with sports, but I'm a firm believer, having had a fantasy sports company when I was in my 20s, and I ran that for about 16 years. Without fantasy sports, the NFL the viewership would go way down. Yeah. It would lose so much revenue. My guess is 20 to 25%. If you took gambling out of it, 35 to 40, because so many people who are watching a meaningless Sunday night game when they need a touchdown from their running back are watching it for that reason. And so that drives revenue, that drives ad viewership, and all those other things that are part of it. But I think telling stories really is.
I just want to comment one thing before we go back to stories. And I think also fantasy, I'm in a fantasy football league, and my basketball league, but it keeps you day to day. I mean, it keeps you current with your consumer, with your client. You're talking about, hey, I have this product in this sense, it's the game, but how do I get somebody to use my product more? Fantasy gets you using the product, looking at the product, studying the product more.
Well, the NFL too is the greatest soap opera. Yeah. Because the players are so out there. You have all these different, because really, honestly, would you, if your kid was, maybe you would if he was talented enough, but kids playing NFL, it's like nowadays parents are so reluctant. I have 2 boys, and I wanted them to play Pee Wee, but when it got into high school and it got more dangerous, so the people who are playing are dramatic characters. They're very interesting. And so they lend to great stories, and that builds up over the week. And then there's the anticipation. Football is a great drama in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. All right. So you were saying about storytelling. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were going to make another.
No, I just think that stories really, reflect your past, your future, all these different things about you. And I think that people can find a way to relate to you based on your stories. So try to be your most true self and go out there. And I will tell you a story about my fantasy sports business.
Yeah, tell
Because
me.
we'll go back into, about failure and how business can turn you into something successful. And a lot of times we all know persistence is important, but sometimes luck is a factor.
Yeah.
And so when I started that business, I thought I'm going to run a bunch of leagues and it'll blow up. And this was when we were doing paper mail business. Believe it. No internet at that time. I was mailing. This is the mid 90s. And all of a sudden, I started building an inner website, and I started getting involved with these programmers, and we were building this data. And so what I found is that I was going to accompany the leagues. I was building news sites. So I built a news site, like a subscription magazine. I was one of the first ones to do it. And we had a subscriber base of, like, the very first year, I think we had like 300 subscribers, but I was like amazed. I'm like, 300, that's amazing. Because I was still like in my 20s. So I was making extra money. The next year, I didn't realize how important it was going to be. And it grew to like 2,000 or 3,000 within the next year, I should say. And it just kept scaling up and scaling up. And I thought I was going to make money doing one thing in that business, and then it became another thing. So I think another thing in business, by the way, if we're going to talk about business, is staying flexible. Staying flexible. You see all these business CEOs of these huge companies that get stuck or fixated on one sort of viewpoint, and they get run over by times. And nowadays, with the way technologies are changing, your flexibility window has to be way more wide open than it ever had to be. You can't sit on one patent for 30 years and just milk it. You have to be adjusting all the time because people want new things. It's changing faster and faster.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. The majority of what I do is, on that note, is one-on-one coaching. And I do keynotes and group trainings too, but the majority is one-on-one. And one of the things I found was, a couple months ago, the world was changing, and many people can't afford to do one-on-one coaching. And so a couple months ago, I'm actually launching it July 1st, this coaching program that is based off of Facebook private page, and micro learning of 2 to 5 minute videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, one live coaching session for the entire group a month, but it's $15 a month.
Right.
And it's $15. It's $15 a month. So anybody in the world can afford it and still get tons of value on tips to grow their business. But I saw this market in a hybrid world that was not being taken care of.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. I hope that works out.
Oh, well. I appreciate it. Thank you. But just to echo your point, you've got to pay attention to the tea leaves of what people need and where the windows of opportunity are.
That's right. I think, and I think we see CEOs every day of these huge companies, these Fortune 500s, get run over because they're not ready. They're not adjusted.
Right.
And, and I think, that's why there's always someone nipping at your heels. So I think, not to go too spiritual here, but I think being open to things, even when you've been burned, is really the key to understanding and being flexible. You are not always right. I mean, if we want to go back to philosophy, which was really the only thing I really enjoyed in college, was learning that, you can learn a lot more. And the older you get, you know less, is what it really comes down to.
Yeah. I think that is, I love that. I loved philosophy. I love studying philosophers. I love just the whole idea of simple philosophy. Yeah. And I love a good quote.
Just go back to the Descartes, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Back to that.
Let's talk about you. You're giving very simple lessons. What has been something that you looked at? Because I think a lot of people are trying to find their entrepreneurial roots right now. You have the Gen Zs and you have the millennials who are very hungry to do it. And then you have the seasoned people who maybe have been let go from their jobs, and they're looking to kind of turn their unique ability into a career. And so what's something that you used to look at in a very complicated way, that you realize, oh, I should be looking at this with simpler eyes, and saw major change?
Well, I mean, I would just tell you my experience of literally launching an exchange traded fund that I just did in the last 2 years. I would say that when I started it, people were like, wow, you're going to have a fund. And I said, well, yeah, I'm going through it. But I had these, you have to keep looking at things, you have to keep trying to understand it and learn about what the business is about. and we're a small company right now, but that doesn't mean we couldn't, we won't have $1 billion under management in 2 or 3 years. It's just saying right now, when you start the process, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like anything, if you look at the life structure of what a fund is and the people that are involved, it's pretty amazing. There are so many people involved in the process that you wouldn't believe it. And if you looked at like the flow chart or a tree of it, it's a complicated process.
Yeah.
But when you start to understand it and you go through it and you learn more, you become familiar. It's just like anything else. And so I look at every day though, like, I'm amazed at something, because I think that's the best way to look at something. Hey, that's amazing to me, because I don't know how they do that. Or, when you learn about these I have 2 young boys who are more into the newer social medias like TikTok and doing all those videos and being part of that. And I think, it's interesting. You're talking about maybe coaching someone who's been in a job for 40 or 50 years. I just think you should be amazed by all those things. I also think passion in what you're doing is most important. I was really lucky. I played sports when I was younger. I love baseball. I hurt my shoulder. I wanted to stay involved in sports. That's why I did the fantasy sports company, doing analytics, numbers, counting. I enjoy it. I like figuring out why something's going to happen, why something continues to happen, why patterns exist. And that led me into the markets too. And so, you have to, like, as Buffett or any of these people would say, do something you love, because it's not working. And we all know you're going to have days where you're not making any money. And so, I just heard, like him or not, because he's a fiery guy, Portnoy from Barstool Sports. And he was talking about how, for a decade or so, they weren't making any money. No one was really seeing them, but it takes a long time to put your flag out there.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to go through that. And so your passion has to be there. Yeah. You have to love that, because when you're not making any money, if you're still loving it, it's not a job. And that's what I always told people. I had a lot of friends who did different things when I had the fantasy sports company, and they were saying to me, I wish I had your job. And sometimes it didn't feel that way, because it's still a job and you have to generate revenue. And when you work for yourself, you have to feel the pressure. Yeah. But, somebody like Portnoy now, who's probably worth a couple $100 million because he had that buyout, went through 10 years or so where they were kind of, they were a media company, but no one really knew about them yet.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no overnight success, no matter, no matter what. And if there is, it's 1 in a million, but you got to do the hard work and the discipline, like you're talking about, day in and day out. What's one of what's one of your unique abilities when it comes to discipline that you would look at and say, this is something that has led to my success? To give an example, I could point to one of mine being my follow-up. My follow-up is always impeccable, right? Even as a business coach, I return every call, text, email every day from anybody who reaches out to me. So what's your one thing?
I think so your thing is more like a routine and a pattern and being persistent. I think persistence is key. I think you have to be the hammer that's on a battery that's charged forever. You just have to be hammering the nail in every day. I know that's a weak analogy, but I think being persistent and following through, and sometimes, being too stupid to realize what you're up against is good.
Yeah, but I agree.
But I just think it's persistence. I think you have to be unrelenting. I had a Doberman for a while, and I haven't had another dog since, because it broke my heart when he died, but he was a very loyal dog. And I named him Juggernaut because he was a powerful, unrelenting force. And that's what a juggernaut is. And that's what I think it takes to be in business, to be a juggernaut. You have to be unrelenting, even when it's the worst of times.
Yeah. I love it. All right. We're going to do a quick speed round. Book that's had the biggest impact on you, Jeffrey.
The book, it's probably like a Bill James book, Baseball Abstract or something like that, to be honest, because I love analytics.
All right, good. I'm sure you love the movie Moneyball.
In fact, I wrote articles with the people in that movie.
Oh, did you?
Paul D. Podesta character was somebody who I was in fantasy leagues with, and we wrote articles together.
Cool. That's very cool.
I love that movie. It's great.
Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
I'd say do something you love and you'll never have a job.
What numbers and analytics and patterns does someone need to look at to make the right call and do the right lineup for their fantasy league?
That's so different, because fantasy football and baseball are different.
I know they're also different, but what are some of the inside secrets?
Okay, this is not a fast question or a fast answer.
I know. Well, it's not really a fast round. I just call it.
Okay, I know. I saw you working your brain on that one to come up with the question because you wanted to talk about it. I would tell you what I found in fantasy football is about hitting the waiver wire every week. You have to be the most active person. I've won a ton of leagues by just being in the waiver wire because you cannot predict injuries.
Mm-hmm.
When I had that business, I used to have a injury kind of ranking on guys because there were some guys who got injured all the time and other guys who could manage to stay healthy. But I would say in fantasy football, what I was always doing is you look for defensive matchups all the time. That's what I would do. We had defensive algorithms that we'd put out there on teams. In baseball, it was about more of baseball's so predictive because you do it so much. I love baseball because if you do something 500 times, that's who you are.
Yeah.
And as you repeat the pattern. So I used to look for half season numbers, quarter season numbers, monthly numbers were really important in baseball because guys get really streaky. Like remember we'd hear a guy and he started off with 10 home runs in April and then he faded and he ended up with 24.
Yeah.
It's a very streaky sport. So I look at it more in blocks in baseball. And then in football is a lot of fluke luck because the way that most fantasy leagues are designed, you have to play over those last two or 3 weeks, which is stinky. When I first played my very first fantasy league, it was with Stats Inc., which was Bill James' company that he was part of, which was in Chicago. And they used to have the greatest fantasy football thing ever because what would happen is your season would go through the final week of the season, and then you'd redraft over the playoff weeks, which was really fun to do it that way. Yeah. But there is no easy answer to that, but you have to be a waiver wire master.
I have the easy answer. I'm going to keep your cell phone in my speed dial and text you during the seasons.
I love it. So I still love it. I play in multiple leagues. I have a league with my best buds from Chicago who I knew since I was 7 years old.
Yeah, I love that. Tell everybody, Jeffrey, who your ideal clients are and how they can connect with you.
Well, my ideal clients are multiple investors for the fund. So if you're interested in investing in sports betting and gaming, you can look up the iBET ETF. We're traded on NASDAQ. You can search Inherent Wealth Fund or Jeffrey Kamys or the iBET ETF and look it up. And you can trade on your custodian platform, TD Ameritrade, Schwab, or whoever you work with.
I love it. I love it. Jeffrey, this was a pleasure. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking about everything from the stats to sports to business and everything that you do to scale. I want to kind of just highlight a couple of things that you talked about. Think community. One of the things Jeff has been talking about is, the importance of being flexible in today's world, telling your story, thinking of yourself as a media company, being open. You can always learn more and to be amazed. I loved all of this simplicity because all of that is so simple. It's complicated, but requires daily discipline to really kind of tap into one, if not multiple of those things throughout the course of a day. So I appreciate your insight. Thanks for sharing your story. Think community. If Jeff can help you, reach out to him. And if I can help you, please reach out to me. Jeff, it was great, man. That was fun.
Thanks for having me.